Of course, book one of Plato's Republic is fascinating. It's so dense, and there's so much going on there, and so many ideas and problems are introduced in book one. It's probably the case that the Republic originally just was book one, and because it resembles other dialogues in so many ways, and that Plato perhaps to speculate, judged that the questions that he had raised, the problems and the difficulties, were insufficiently dealt with in book one, and that he needed to go on and deal with them in more depth. But we have book one is just packed with ideas, and there's no doubt that there are two major questions that are raised here that will lead us through the rest of the book. And the first is the nature of justice itself, the question, what is justice? What kind of thing justice is? And the second question, which in a way I believe, if you think about the kind of people surrounding Socrates in this conversation and what they're really interested in, perhaps a more pressing question, and that is whether it's a good choice to be just. Now, of course, Socrates, being Socrates, would insist that you can't answer the second question before you answer the first. I mean, you can try, but your answers will be tentative and questionable and shaky at best, because you need to know what justice is before you can make a decision about whether it's a good thing to be just. But I think that the people there, the men there, are more interested in that second question. And perhaps those two questions at the end of the day can't really be separated. That you can't just sort of say that we can answer them independently. Maybe they need to be answered together. In any case, there are arguments, there are ideas, there are all sorts of things that are introduced here. Too many to review in a short video. But as I said, what I want to do in these videos is just tell you what I find most striking about each book, and you take that for what you want. Again, you don't have to watch these videos. But what always struck me as, one of the most interesting things in book one and in all of Plato is when Thrasymachus says many things that are really interesting and worth thinking about. And that in itself is different. Plato. I mean, very often the people that Socrates is speaking with in Plato don't really have much interesting to say. Well, Thrasymachus does have many interesting things to say. And my favorite thing that he says is on page 20 at the bottom in our edition, when he asks Socrates if he still has a wet nurse. Very, in a way, violent and rude, to say the very least thing to say. It's this grown man, older man by that time, middle-aged man, to say, do you still have a wet nurse? And Socrates is like, what are you talking about? And Thrasymachus says, because she's still letting you run around with a snotty nose and she needs to wipe it. Of course, that's just a terrible, thing to say to somebody. But I think that Thrasymachus is getting across there. And this is after Socrates has begun to refute, tear apart Thrasymachus's definition of justice as the advantage of the stronger, and to try to show that that is really the reverse. That it's not the advantage of the stronger. That is actually what is advantageous for the weaker. Thrasymachus is obviously very frustrated, and seemingly by that remark, what he's trying to tell Socrates is that you just don't get it. You don't get what I've said, but you don't get the world. That is, when you ask somebody if they still have a wet nurse, what you're accusing them is of thinking and behaving like a child. Thrasymachus is saying that Socrates has a childish view of the world, a naive view of the world, of what the world is like, of what people are like, and especially of what politics is like, what government is like. Socrates has, from Thrasymachus's point of view, a notion of government which is too idealistic. That is, the people who have the power use it to benefit those over whom they rule. And Thrasymachus' idea, that's just a fatal mistake. People who have power, according to Thrasymachus, use it to their own advantage. The strong rule over the weak. And if you don't understand that, you're going to be a victim. That is, you need to see that justice is not your advantage, unless you're the stronger, then it's to your advantage. But being just is simply playing the game that is set up to benefit someone else. Now, I am freely extrapolating, expanding upon what Thrasymachus says, and obviously I have a lot of sympathy for what Thrasymachus says. He's not a sympathetic character, but I think that what he says, if we suitably sort of think about it, as the men around him think about it, as we see in Book 2, as they try to reformulate it in a more respectable way, is a great challenge to a thinker like Socrates. You know? How are you going to conceive of the way that the place that justice has in a human life? If the world is as Thrasymachus believes it is, if it's a cutthroat, competitive world of selfish individuals who are driven only by their self-interest, their desires, their own happiness and fulfillment, and that's the sort of world we live in, why would anyone choose to be just in the traditional sense? Why not do your best to get enough power in life that you can actually achieve some happiness, some fulfillment of desire on your part? This, I think, is, except for the question of what justice is the only really important question that the rest of the book asks, is whether in choosing to be just, I am taking the path of happiness, or whether in choosing to be just, I am consigning myself to a life where it's more or less probable that I'm going to be unhappy and unfulfilled. And if you think about the rest of the book, boy, what a large, involved, convoluted, wide-ranging argument that Socrates has to come up with to provide a view of the world, of the human person, of politics, of reality itself, that will be able to stand up to that Thrasymachus view of the world, that, what would you say, cynical, realist, jaded view of the way the world is. So, I think in a way, that very rude thing that Thrasymachus says to Socrates, do you have a wet nurse because she's letting you run around sniveling with a snotty nose, is very telling, because you have two different worldviews here, views of human nature, politics, reality. They're certainly incompatible, and you have one person saying, my view is the clear-eyed, correct view, and your view, Socrates, is one that can only be taken seriously by a child.